should I test? No, you should be good to go to level. We just had some. I'm good.
Bridging Worlds, the power of being bilingual in communication careers. Join a diverse group of dynamic and accomplished communicators as they delve into the significance of being bilingual in today's fast-paced communication industries. Explore the unique advantages and opportunities that linguistic diversity brings to the table, breaking down barriers and fostering cross-cultural understanding. Our panelists will share personal experiences illustrating the impact of bilingualism on their careers in diverse sectors such as journalism, public relations, marketing, and more. This session is moderated by Leticia Couto, a Ph.D. candidate in the Murrow College of Communication. She has conducted research involving quantitative and qualitative methods such as surveys, experiments, focus groups, in-depth interviews, and content analyses. Her areas of interest include sexual health, which encompasses sexual risk behavior, sexual violence, violence against women, and romantic relationships, substance abuse, particularly as it relates to sexual risk behavior, focusing on cannabis and alcohol consumption, and body image, focusing on how positive messages, including body positivity, can improve body image. In these three areas, she applies communication lenses by creating theory-driven messaging to address these issues and by investigating media effects in entertainment and social media depicting these behaviors. Her population of interest is young adults and adolescents, and she has conducted research with both groups. She is published in the Journal of Sex Research, the Journal of Health Communication, and Sexuality and Culture, among others. Further, she has not only taught multiple classes focusing on the role of media in society and content creation, but she has also guest lectured in PR-focused classes and in graduate-level method seminar. She also held an internship position at Spectrum Labs, a leading generative AI company in the United States that focuses on trust and safety in online environments. Please welcome Leticia.
Hi there, folks. All right, can everybody hear me? Cool. That was a lot. But welcome to our panel today. I'm so excited to be here. As our lovely introduction headed, I'm Leti Couto. I'm your moderator today. I'm a PhD here in the Murrow College and an incoming assistant professor at DePaul University this fall in public relations and advertisement. In addition to my scholarly position, I've held some positions here in the Murrow College, helping with social media in academic conferences and that sort of thing. I try to always combine strategic communication and health in my research, and I am bilingual, which is probably why I'm here today. I speak Portuguese and English, and it's an honor to moderate this panel, Bridging Worlds, the Power of Being Bilingual in Communication Careers. We're going to start off today with our lovely panelists introducing themselves, and then I'm going to have some questions for them. And I'm going to leave about 20 minutes at the end for a Q&A with the audience. And for our folks that are online, if you put questions in the chat, we're going to address those at the end as well. With that said, I think we're ready to get it started. So I'll leave it up to our panelists to introduce themselves. Go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daisy Zavala Magaña. I'm an alumni of the college. I graduated around 2021. So right now I am working in Nogales, Arizona. It's a border town with Sonora, if you're not familiar with the region. I'm a reporter and photographer there. But formerly I was working at the Seattle Times when I was living here. But I've reported all across the state in Olympia, Spokane, and wherever I was sort of focusing on Latino stories and farm workers and all the gaps that are traditionally very ignored in our media landscape. And that's, the skinny of what I do as a summary.
My name is Enrique Cerna. I'm a recovering broadcast journalist. I worked in the business full-time for about 43 years. I spent all my career in Seattle. I graduated from WSU a long time ago, 1975, and my son graduated from the school too. I'm on the Board of Regents here at WSU. I was appointed by the governor in March of 2020, just in time for COVID. And the hits have been coming ever since I've been on the board, but you know, that's what it is. And I grew up in the Yakima Valley. My parents are from Mexico, settled in the valley. And I, you know, being a journalist, one of the things people have asked me before, what was one thing that was my highest accomplishment, or I don't know, highest accomplishment or something that meant the most to me. In 2012, I produced a documentary about Latinos in Washington State. And so I was very pleased that I got the opportunity to do that. And it's still online. It's called Latinos, the Changing Face of Washington. So that's me.
All righty, thank you so much, folks. We're gonna go ahead and get started with our questions. So the first question that I have for you today is, how did your bilingual skills make a difference in your career?
Do you want to take it first?
No, you go.
Okay. So I actually, well, I think I might have mentioned I grew up in Wenatchee. It's also a very farm working type of community. There's a lot of agriculture in the region. My parents are from Michoacan, Mexico. They're actually here. They very kindly came
Raise your
to
hand, Mom and Dad.
give me a ride back to
Bienvenidos.
Wenatchee. But I think as bilingual journalists, we maybe don't really think about what skill that really is, and a lot of times we overlook it, because it's just something that we have and something that comes easily, but I've only been in the industry maybe 3 years, but in that time I've been able to reflect back and realize a lot of the stories that I've written wouldn't really have been told. Maybe it would have been 5 more years until somebody else that had those skills that I have, having grown up in a farm working community, speaking the language fluently, would have been able to bring that, and like Enrique said, it's not something that, I started, as Latinos, we've been trying to cover these gaps for a long time, and I'm sure we will for decades to come. But it's just let me tell stories that I know need to be told and that for a long time just haven't. And so when I think about what those skills have given me is just the ability to uplift those narratives and give people a chance to tell their own stories and in their own words, because that's not really an option for a lot of our communities out here.
Well, I think one thing that you need to look at today is the growing Latino population across the country. And in Washington State, we are the largest ethnic group. And if you look at Washington State University, that Latinos are the largest ethnic group here as well, and growing. If you look at WSU in the Tri-Cities, I think we're like 50% there. And we have counties in the state that are more than 50% Latino. And so I think that alone tells you that we're an economic stimulus. I mean, let's face it. I come from a very large Latino family, a Mexican-American family. We have an annual family reunion that's usually attended by about 250 people. And so I always joke that when we come to town, we're an economic stimulus, because we are. But I also think that when I started in the business, people would ask me if I spoke Spanish or can I understand Spanish and things like that. And I'd say, well, yes. And my Spanish could be better. I know that. But early on, it wasn't something that people looked at as or in the news business when I was working early on, that it was a positive, or that they looked at it as, well, this is something where we should look at this community, or there's stories there. So I spent a lot of time, I guess, educating and informing my bosses and that, okay, here's a story in this community and this is why we should cover it. And I spent a lot of time sometimes knocking my head against the wall because I couldn't get their attention to do it. But then when incidents would happen or whatever, it was kind of like when I was a little kid and migrant farm worker kids would come. We were told not to speak Spanish in school, but then they'd pair me with the migrant kids that came in to help them go to the bathroom and all of that. When they needed you to do that, then they needed you to do that. Now, gradually things have changed, I think, just because of the population and things like that. So for me, over the years, I've had instances where being able to understand Spanish, being able to speak Spanish has been a real positive. People in our community will talk to you because it's someone that, okay, they can relate to you. And one time I was telling a friend of mine today that I was one time shooting in some farm workers working in the Yakima Valley, and I could hear them talking about me negatively. And so I just turned around and said, "Yo te entiendo." And then they all kind of like, oh, and then after that, they talked to me, but one of the reasons they talked to me is because they suddenly was somebody, oh, hey, that guy, he does understand what we're saying. And it's really worked for me in a lot of different situations as a reporter. People will open up because it's someone they can relate to. One other quick story is that I was in Morocco once, and the driver we had, he didn't understand English too well, but he spoke Arabic, but he could speak some Italian. So, and then we were lost on where we were going. So I started talking to him in Spanish. Well, he could pick up some of that, and then I could pick up some of his Italian. We managed to get where we were going. So it bridges things. So it's a positive. Just think of it. It's like, it's 2 versus 1. And I think if you can, and in Europe, people speak 3, 4 different languages. So it's a positive, and I think Americans sometimes are just really clueless about that. So anyway.
Thank you. Awesome. Let's get our new panelists to give the chance to introduce themselves. Whoops, they went away. There they are. All right. Oh.
Hi, sorry everybody for joining late. My name is Ezeonu. Graduated WSU in 2017. Right away became a journalist for the Telemundo NBC affiliate here in Washington State, KNDU. Traveled to Oklahoma City to be the main sports anchor out there. And then from there, I decided to come back home to work in the PR communication department here with the Seattle Mariners, and also being their main translator here for the team. So, that's just a little bit about my role that I do here, is just focusing on the PR stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction. And we're going to go for a second question now, which is, so we've talked a little bit about how things have changed and ways that the ability to speak 2 languages was beneficial. But if you were talking to somebody that is graduating and they wanted to know how to market that skill, how do you think it would be an appropriate way to go about it? It's like, hey, this is a skill I have, and I think I could really leverage that.
I think that's, when you're going for a job or whatever you're doing, you make sure that you tell them you're bilingual. And today it's a positive, I think. What I find really heartening is that so many young people like Daisy here that are bilingual already. They speak Spanish and they speak English. And, we have a student regent here, Isaac Marroquin, who's on the board of regents with me. He's from El Salvador. And that is really, I think that's just so cool that that's part of their growing up. And I think that that's such a positive thing for them to be able to speak 2 languages already. And I'm sure in many cases, you probably helped your parents with just being able to communicate and things. So that to me, it's like a great tool. And when you list your skills of what you can do, you can shoot this kind of video, you can edit this with this type of software, that you got to make sure that they understand that you're bilingual. It's a huge positive. I'm sure that, covering the border, you wouldn't be able to do that if you couldn't speak Spanish. So make a big deal out of it, because it's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I would add as well, I think because of the rapid changing demographics in our country, it's just kind of a necessary skill to have for everybody who lives here, whether or not you grew up with it. And if you're able to speak it, let that be known in your resume, or, you know, take classes. We also live in a digital age where, you know, you can highlight, well, I'm bilingual, and that helps me also go on, you know, Latino Facebook or Twitter, or like all these niche, don't want to use that word, right? But they're very focused, and the conversations that are happening, they are very different. And like, you know, my panelist here mentioned, yeah, like for myself, I wouldn't be able to be working in the border if I didn't have fluency with the language. Sometimes we write stories from Nogales, Sonora. So we're going into Mexico, we're talking to migrants, we're talking to residents and officials. And, you know, most people are bilingual, but some people are not. And there's just such a difference in being able to carry a conversation, I think, with that fluency and the comfort that that creates. But even just you trying and being, you know, taking those first steps to even just try to start meeting people where they are with Spanish or whatever other language you might benefit from, you know, it's a good start, I would say.
I think if you know a second language, it's such a plus. And, you know, if you, in a job situation, we're a global society now. We're not just local. We are a global society, and everything we do at this university and in jobs today, if you have that skill, it's just a plus. It's a huge plus. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I mean, market it as best as you can. I mean, even in my resume, it's one of the first things you see, you know, being able to, I had to, or was able to also work Telemundo and NBC. So some of those work samples are stuff that follows me, you know, everywhere where I'm applying, even including here with the Mariners. I mean, I feel like that was a big plus of why I got this job. They're like, okay, he can do the PR side of stuff. And when we need him to translate live for someone, you know, he can step up and do it. So I feel if that's the first thing that you can market, I mean, go for it, because it will help you in the long run.
Yeah. Freddie, how many Latin players do the Mariners have?
Oh, we have a ton. But some of these guys, you know, they join the team at like 17, 16 years old. So they pick up the English, but there's some guys that just can't pick it up. So, you know, I'm there with the team basically 24/7 if I can, to just help with them whenever, you know, reporters want to talk to them.
Oh.
Thank you so much for all the answers. And I think that so far we've talked about how absolutely awesome it is to be bilingual, which I agree 100%. But I was wondering if we could also explore any challenges that come with being bilingual in the communication field. And if you could share any takes that you have on that.
I'd have to say that that's an interesting question. I think, you know, if you listen to Maria, you know, Jose yesterday when she talked about, you know, early in her career, she was one of the few that, like when she would say her name, you know, Maria, you know, and like if I would say my name, Enrique Cerna, that sometimes people are like, well, okay, why don't you pronounce it more Americanized? And, you know, you still run into these attitudes of, well, that's not very American. I was born here. I'm as American as anybody else. So, you know, I find that to be real, pardon me, but real BS. That's who you are. It's with the country you come from. So that's how you pronounce your, you know, I mean, I remember being a little kid and having teachers tell me, don't speak Spanish. Or having teachers later, you know, you should change your name. You know, you should call yourself Henry. And, you know, so I found that really offensive. And so you still deal with those kind of difficult attitudes of people that don't appreciate other cultures. And so, and frankly, I think that that's part of our job as journalists and reporters, and what Freddie does, in helping even the players kind of manage that stuff, because that's an American thing that we have a hung. I suppose every country has their own hangups about things like that, but those are the things you kind of encounter, and we still obviously are. It's a problem. It's a problem, and our politics today only make that a little tougher, in the country, especially when you get these idiots that are talking about, immigrants being bad, even though you're married to one or two or three. So anyway, I think we run into just attitude types of things. But then again, that's a chance for us. It's a learning moment. We can make a difference there. I really do think we can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, personally, I've had a few. So my full name is Daisy Zavala Magaña. It's kind of long for some people, and I think a lot of times you get some comments that are not meant to be like ill. There's no ill will, but still, my second last name Magaña has a letter that does not exist in the English language. And many times, like in newsrooms, it's like a joke, oh, it's such a hassle, or, oh, I forgot to make sure that it was right online or on print, on the byline. And, at the end of the day, it's still my name. I would love if you just took, if managers or editors took those like 20 seconds to copy and paste it. But, a lot of times it just gets forgotten, I think, because there's not an open conversation, right, about it. And on the other hand, I have been in some newsrooms here in Washington where the skills that you have as a bilingual journalist are like not really considered or important, or they're ignored because we know that our community, the Latino community, is the fastest growing ethnic group in the US, but also here in Washington. But some newsrooms are kind of behind, and they're not really looking at us as like an audience that they care to grow right now. So some efforts just fall short, or like you may have those skills of being bilingual, or you're looking at these stories and you're that they're newsworthy, and that there's an audience that you can tap into, but the conversations are really hard to have. And for me, it's been really hard because I have like 3 years in the industry, and then before that 1 or 2 years, and people don't take you seriously. But if I can say anything, is just keep pushing for it. But if you feel like it's running you into the ground, go somewhere else. There's a lot of work to do everywhere, and it doesn't mean you can't come back or anything. It's not a reflection of you giving up on this thing that matters, but more so knowing when to reel it back, or start investing in something else.
Well, I think that also points to the fact that we need more people in management positions and editor positions, or those upper level positions, so they can relate and understand. And so that's on us to make sure that we stay in the business and work our way up to those positions. So then we bring that to the table. So yeah.
No, I totally agree. But for me, I think one of my first challenges when I first wanted to be a reporter, I wanted to do NBC. That was all I wanted to do, not really Spanish. So then all of a sudden I'm doing Telemundo, right? I think I made a mistake of not really focusing on my Spanish throughout school. I mean, all of a sudden, I go through the whole education system and it's all in English. I'm learning how to read, I'm learning grammar, doing all this stuff. Now I'm in a professional setting where everything I got to do is in Spanish, and I'm learning on the go. I'm learning where to put accents. I'm learning what correct words to use, how to write. So I'm learning this as I go. So if there was some advice, I'd say kind of take advantage of the school system. If there's classes that you can learn, some of those skills. And in terms of some of the challenges I face here is story pitching. I mean, my job is to kind of go to reporters and be like, hey, you should write about this or this. And a lot of times from, I want to say management, they would come up with the story, and I'm like, this is not going to work for the Spanish audience. You know, it's maybe it'll work on this side, but for some reason or whatever, it's not really going to impact them. They're not really going to pay attention to this. So it's always me trying to explain to them why it's not going to work, or if it's going to work, we have to do it this other way. And, you know, it's just part of my job here to just, I guess, kind of be the two bridges between the front office and also the players here.
You know, I was yes, talking to Isaac today earlier, and just I'm a little bit older than you guys, but I grew up, you know, in the Yakima Valley, and my father's from Michoacan, and my mother was from Coahuila, but they settled in the valley. And growing up, I had this real, I don't know, I found it kind of confusing, because on one hand, I lived in a Mexican household. On the other hand, I was going to, you know, school on a daily basis where you're challenged to assimilate. And so, you know, it's like you're schizophrenic sometimes, because you're going from both places. And that was a real difficult thing, because I think sometimes growing up, I sort of pushed away my Mexican side because I wanted to fit in. And it actually wasn't until I came here to WSU that a lot of that changed for me. And I think it was just the times, and, you know, there was also the civil rights movement was pretty active and all of that. So I actually feel a bit kind of, I don't know if embarrassed is the right word, whatever. I'm a little pissed at myself that I did that I didn't, you know, because that's who I am. That's my family. I mean, that's being Latino is an important thing. So I've really struggled with that through the years. And I don't know if the younger folks do, but that was a challenging thing for me at times. I'm older now, so it's a whole different deal. And for me, I have a grandson that, you know, he's half white, half Mexican, or maybe third, I don't know. So one of my goals is to make sure that, you know, like he can't say abuelo yet, but he calls me abuelo. So, and it's very important for me to understand, and to understand where the family parts of that come from, so that they don't lose that. So, but that's a struggle I think sometimes we have in dealing with things. But it's holding on to your roots, and feeling proud of it, like what Maria talked about, and just like how you pronounce your name, and the fact that you can do that. She's like a proud Latina, and she lets everybody know. So I think for all of us, wherever we come from, that, you know, we need to look at that as a positive and not look at that as a negative at all. So yeah, do you ever feel that way?
Actually, I mean, I grew up in a very, very Mexican household. You know, we spoke Spanish at home, and I think my parents always were like, we don't want you to ever lose it. And I think that, and also Wenatchee at the time when I grew up, it was like 40% Latino now. So there was a strong community, and I never really felt, you know, isolated, or like I couldn't be Mexican, or I couldn't say certain things. Then when I left, I started feeling differently, because other spaces in the cities like Spokane, you know, you don't really have that sense of community. And it was also kind of hard to find in Seattle. And I mean, ultimately I did, but it's a different experience. But growing up, I didn't feel, thankfully, like I couldn't. And now that I'm in Nogales, it's a whole different experience, right? Being somewhere where I believe like 94% have Latino heritage, we're bilingual, people look like me, people respond to me in Spanish or initiate conversations in Spanish. And that's just not, yeah, I don't know. It's a different experience for sure. And I don't think I can eloquently describe what it kind of feels like, but I haven't felt homesick. I mean, I miss my parents, I miss my family, I miss my friends, but I don't really, I haven't felt like I don't belong there. And that's not something I can really say about Washington, but I love Washington. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's tough.
Well, yeah, it is. Freddie,
Yeah,
did you ever feel confused like me?
You know what? Similar, sometimes in terms of, I mean, I grew up in Mattawa, Washington, and then Findlay, Washington. So I grew up I always grew up in this like little Mexican bubble with my parents. They speak no English, so Spanish was always it in the household, and the only English I spoke was at school. But I did feel it a little bit once I got, because I grew up in the agriculture. That's all I did all throughout college, even, and once I got my first reporter job, that's kind of what it started to feel like. I felt like a little bit of I didn't belong there, because some of the newsrooms or some even here, when we have conferences here, I feel like sometimes I'm the only Latino here, the only Mexican here. And I'm like, do I really belong here? Sometimes it gets to me in that mindset, but at the same time, I worked hard, I have the same education and all these people here. So, it's a little tough sometimes, but you just gotta remember, you work just as hard as they do. And plus you have something else to offer, which is, speak Spanish.
Don't ever feel like you don't belong, because the fact that you're there means you belong. So yeah, to be proud of that. So you too. Yeah. I'm the old guy here, so I can tell them that. So.
I was going to say, I second that sentiment 100%. And we do have about 20 minutes left. I want to thank everyone for the awesome answers so far. I really hope that everybody has had the great experience that I've had. But I wanted to check how we're doing with the chat, if we have any questions in the chat, and if any audience members have any questions for our panelists. Okay, sounds good. So chat folks, if you need anything, just give us the heads up. Yes, we have a question over here.
Thank you for a very informative talk. My name is Joy. I am a PhD fellow with Leticia here, and I'm so excited to be part of this group of language enthusiasts. English is my third language. So coming from Kenya, we initially speak vernacular, and then we have Swahili, which is our national language, and then English is our language of academic instruction and business. So it's great being here. My purpose being a journalist comes from the fact that I got into school speaking vernacular. The teacher had no idea what language I spoke, so I had to go back to school an extra year. And that really triggered something in my head for, since I was 7. So every time I was transiting from one level to another, I always thought like, oh my gosh, they're just going to deny me to go back to, to go to the next level. And that really, triggered something. And I said, I am going to progress from elementary to high school to university and ensure that I acquire that language at every level. So today I speak 7 languages. Wow. And it's been fantastic. It has opened doors for me. It has enabled me as a journalist to be a fly in the wall. And it's always great being able to go to the market and do an interview in vernacular and go to an English setting, do the same, and also give me an opportunity to speak to persons who are hearing impaired. So I'm also conversant in Kenyan Sign Language. I'm learning American Sign Language, which is related, but I've been able to add Japanese, Chinese, and French to the work. So really excited to be part of language enthusiasts like me, and the challenges are real, but I would say the benefits are immense. I don't always use my languages every day. I just have small flashcards. And if I have an engagement when I need to use a particular language, then I get my flashcards out and I begin practicing the language once again, like a week before. I will listen to the music, I will listen to watch movies, and it's always great being part of a team that appreciates the power of languages in journalism.
Here with us. Yeah, God, you put
Thank you.
The shame. Can I ask a question? When in your country, because I have cousins in Mexico, and pretty much all of the younger ones speak English because from school. Is there an emphasis in your country about that, to be able for them to for you to learn English or others to learn English?
Oh, yes. So English is really our instruction right from elementary school. No, straight from kindergarten, but you will find that vernacular is the most dominant language at home. And then we have vernacular radio stations, vernacular TV. And I'm also practicing the same with my daughter. So she speaks 4 languages. And so at home, we deliberately speak vernacular, watch vernacular TV. And then by the time we go to school, then it's an opportunity for them to, practice and perfect English. And, research has shown that once you develop a language way before 5 years, and it's easier for you to learn a second, a third, and a fourth language. So always encouraging parents to ensure that your child gets to grab a language before they get to 5, and they will never forget.
I do a podcast, and it's called Chino y Chicano. My podcast partner actually just passed away, but he's Chinese, and I always called him El Chino, and then I was the Chicano guy. But anyway, we were talking about when he was growing up in a Chinese household, his parents, they only spoke Chinese to each other. He didn't pick it up because they didn't speak it to him. But he said he had a grandfather that lived with him for a while, and the grandfather spoke Chinese, and he goes, I don't know why, but I could understand him and he could understand me. And I'm pretty sure it was because he was a young kid at the time. And it's just sort of like this osmosis thing where you just pick it up. And so I think, yeah, that's kind of cool. That whole early learning thing, it's just important. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, you have a question? Hi, yes, I do. So sorry, I only speak one language, not even, and I don't speak it
That's
very
okay.
well, but I'm going to do my best. So to add a little context to this question, oh, sorry, not good at speaking with microphones. This is a new experience for me. So several years ago, I went on a study abroad trip to Mexico and Guatemala with a group of college friends. And while we were down there, it was a school-sponsored trip. Out of all of us, there were 2 girls who are now my best friends they were the only ones who spoke Spanish. And because of that, they were often thrust into the position of translator. Our teacher over and over would put us in situations like we would go to a show or go through a tour through a cave system and say, no, we don't need a translator or a guide. We have our students here. And so repeatedly they were put into the position of having to translate for us, even though they were students just like the rest of us. And it was a lot of work. And so I'm wondering, have you ever found yourself in situations like that where you're meant to take on the brunt of translating for other people? And do you feel like that work is valued? And what do you think would be a solution if you feel like it's not valued?
I have. So because I was working with Latino communities in Spokane, Olympia, and Seattle, you do the translation work because you care and because you want that the people that you are talking to and writing about have access. And so on the occasions that I pushed for it, sometimes I'll have to translate everything myself, and on occasions they haven't gotten back to me to publish it. So I did a lot of labor to translate and then nothing comes of it. You get ghosted. And those were occasions where I was freelancing. And if you know anything about freelancing, is that they usually ghost you or steal your ideas. Not to say, don't freelance, but there's like a lot of risk there, unfortunately.
And they don't pay you, right?
And they don't pay you
Yeah.
or very, very little. Or I've been in positions where at first they're like, yeah, we don't really see why we would do that. And then they change their minds and they're like, okay, can you also translate like 5 other stories that you didn't write? Or, when other reporters are working on a story, they want you to like set up interviews or write like a little blurb of introduction. And I've ended up doing it because I want to give that access, but it is work that definitely should be compensated for. And I think we should start talking about how to advocate for that. Because when you're entry level, I think, at least in my case, you're more likely to say yes, yes, yes. Either because you care about the community, you want to make the access, you don't know how to advocate for it. And I think a way to fix that is to just like start talking about it and have like good mentors that you can reach out to and be like, hey, this is what's happening. What do you think? But a clear-cut answer, I don't know, because it's something I'm still struggling with at times. But like the other Latino journalists that have been in the industry longer than I have, are very vocal about, you know, this is a skill and you should be paid for it, you should be compensated, or you should, you know, talk about, you know, what's fair. Because it's labor still, even if you do it out of your heart or because you care.
I think, yeah, you have to advocate for yourself at various points. And I think that's like in any situation, any business or whatever, and particularly if people are taking advantage of you to try to, you know, for their benefit. And so it's really a matter of like, okay, how much is too much? And then you just kind of have to put your foot down and say, okay, look, you know, can't do everything for you. So it's the situation more than anything else. Yeah.
Similar situation with me. I mean, when I was transitioning from becoming a reporter to the PR side, and they were honest, they were, hey, we might need you to translate every now and then. And I was honest with them. I was like, the only time I've translated was when I go with my parents to the bank. You know, that's what I had. And they're like, we'll just go. And then all of a sudden we trade for Luis Castillo, who we just signed to a huge contract. So one of the stars of this team, it's like, okay, he can't just be going around, you know, on the road with no translator. So all of a sudden, PR guy to full translator kind of too. So it feels, and I'm similar with your situation, you know, you just got to the Seattle Mariners and, you know, I'm going to do whatever they ask me, you know, translating, transcribing stuff, everything. And it got to the point where everything literally that was Spanish with the Seattle Mariners was coming through me. If there was a video that a Spanish player was being interviewed, I was sitting there on my computer for, you know, a couple hours, literally adding subtitles to the whole video for the video department. If the video department wanted to interview a minor league player, Freddie, can you be there to do the interview? You know, because he only speaks Spanish. Little things like that that just started piling and piling, and they even gave me our Spanish social media accounts. You know, and it got to the point where, you know, as you learn more, it's like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to need some help or more pay. And finally this year, you know, I got an assistant who's bilingual. She's great and been able to help me. But, you know, when you first start, I feel like with my situation, I just wanted to do everything. Everything they said, I said yes to. But then little by little, you know, stuff started to add up. And it got to the point where I was hired to be the PR guy, but I felt like I wasn't even doing that job, you know?
I think you have to be careful too, because it becomes an issue of your mental health and just your health. And when you're first in the business, it's like I said, it's just, you say yes to everything because you want the opportunity and you don't want to say no because you don't want to, you know, put your job in any jeopardy. So it's a matter of learning what the limits are, and also then sometimes too, it's really convincing, oftentimes a white manager or supervisor that, hey, you're taking advantage of my skill, and so you need to pay me for it because it is a valued skill. So it's a fine line and kind of dicey in a way, because you have to make sure that you're doing it at the right time to benefit them, but also yourself. So yeah.
We have an online question. Thank you for all the great advice to our panelist. I'm a transfer student from Yakima Valley College. I am Mexican and Spanish is my first language. In regard to challenges with being bilingual, what advice can you give with challenges with low vocabulary development and speech insecurities? I spoke Spanish at home and would get in trouble for speaking English. All my parents wanted was for me to not lose my ability to speak good Spanish. At school, I spoke English, but didn't speak Spanish to fit in. So for me, changing back and forth hurt my vocabulary in both languages. What is something someone with this challenge can do to surpass these insecurities?
Man, that's going to lead you to therapy at some point. Geez, I can totally understand that because I kind of had the same thing. I think that I don't know. How do you answer that one? That's a tough one because you really kind of have to push through. You got to think about, okay, what are going to be the benefits for myself down the line here? And I just would encourage them to, you know, to keep working on both, well, working on your English for one thing. As you know, a lot of people that I know, my sister was a Spanish teacher, and oftentimes when she talked to her students or the parents actually, and they often, they just wanted to speak in Spanish because that was their comfort level. But she always encouraged them to learn English or do the best they could, because you got to adapt. You're going to be in this country. We have to adapt to that. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. And it'll benefit you, you know, if you know both languages. So it's a challenge, but it's also something, I think it's a necessity so that you don't get taken at various times. I can remember when I was younger, my father, you know, sometimes would like he would have someone write out a check for him. And I was a little guy, and I kind of saw that and I thought, Dad, no, give that to me. And I can remember being a little kid and filling out the check for him just because I was afraid he was going to get, you know, ripped off. So it's a tough one, but I think it's something that if you want to improve your skills, you got to do what you can to do that so that you can just compete in our society.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
There's a course here at WSU that's called Spanish for Heritage Learners.
Yeah.
And that is basically the course for students that have that situation.
Oh, great.
And there's a Spanish for Professions as well.
We need to hook that person up.
Yeah.
Can we do that? Can we help that? Maybe we can get more information from you about how to get that. Okay. Well, we should look that up to make sure that that's out there. Yeah.
For sure.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I'll say we have time for one more question from the audience. Oh, it's very exciting to see multiple hands. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I want to be respectful of everybody's time.
Hello, Brando Leon Raimundo, studying public relations and advertising. And I just kind of ask you guys about like, if you guys can speak to the importance of like representation in your fields. I know like in journalism, especially in journalism in Seattle, the representation is not there, you know, especially in the newsrooms and in like a field like PR. Can you guys just kind of speak to the importance of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely important because when you are entry level in your first gen and you don't really know anybody in the industry or really anybody that might have like a professional career, having someone that just like understands things that you don't even understand yourself quite yet, maybe because you're young, is so important. And I just, I mean, I have that now because I work in Nogales International. My editor is a Latina woman. She grew up in the border town. But here in Seattle, I never really had that at all. And then I was working odd hours. And there is like a NHJ chapter, but there's not a lot of like we're here, you know, we're here and we're there, but there's not a lot of us. And so I didn't even have time to go and meet them or network with them because I worked those evenings, right? So if I had had any kind of access to like a mentor or an editor that shared like my cultural background, or at least like was open to being like, hey, like what's going on, how are you feeling, that might have changed the course of my career. I mean, I'm happy where I'm at now, but I think having that mentorship is important, but you can find it, right? I think it was just affecting my mental health because it does, but if you're aware of it now, you can do the networking, you can email people, you can set coffee dates on the weekend. And even if they're not working at your company, you LinkedIn is great, like message them. If they don't respond, that's okay, but they might. And then you'll have someone in the industry, you know, with more experience that can offer some insights maybe.
I've always tried to, because I had a long career, that well, we talked yesterday. I always try to make myself available to the folks that are coming up about, just to talk or what's out there, what's available. Although I'm not doing it on a daily basis, I'm still connected to the community. I'm also involved with the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, the chapter in Seattle. And we're, those of us that are at kind of the officer level there, we have quite a bit of experience. And one of our challenges is to reach out to kind of the younger generation, to know them that there is a community and that we want to connect with them and help them grow as best they can. So, the bigger thing is just we got to get more people involved in this and stay with it. I think that there are times when, people get down about it, but, we, like when with Maria, I mean, you saw someone that just persevered. And when it wasn't working for her, she created her own thing. So sometimes there's that. But we have growing numbers, so we really need to be there for that. And I would think for Freddie, I mean, there's a growing Latino. I mean, let's face it, they're important to Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I mean, MLB requires at least one, translator to be with the team, but a lot of teams have either a coach, someone in the medical staff, doing it. I think it's important, or a representation for me being in the front office, to be with the players, to be doing all this, because I want to say there's a gap between, being in the locker room and being in the front office. People don't really interact. And for me, being that bridge between both of them has really, I feel like, created great relationship between that front office and the players, because the players have someone that can go to me and be like, hey, we're having this issue. A lot of the players also be like, for example, right, one of the players like, my family's always here, but none of the signs here at T-Mobile Park are really in Spanish. And it's like, well, half of their players, speak Spanish and their families are here. So being able to deliver little stuff like that to the front office, players are feeling this or doing this, it's very important for me, because I mean, I grew up with it, right? My parents don't speak Spanish, and these guys, even though they make millions of dollars, they still very humble, very hardworking guys that, a lot of them have that fear of speaking in public English, or even trying to, because, so I guess what I'm trying to say is just, being that bridge and having someone in there that the players can trust with any issues outside of baseball. I mean, it's just a huge plus for me being able to be there.
Awesome. I want to thank everyone for such awesome answers to our questions. We're going to wrap things up. Thank for the audience as well for being awesome. And we are going to have our keynote lunch here as well. So if you want to hang out for that, I highly encourage you. And also a round of applause for our panelists. They were awesome.
Okay. Vamos Cougs.
Vamos Cougs.